All right, here's the question everyone wants to know the answer to. Are these the perfect binocular? In order to answer that question, we need to have 3 different conversations. And this is where I think other reviews have gone off the rails or failed to adequately answer the question about where these reside in your arsenal. Question number 1, HDX Pro versus HDX. Which one is better? Pros, cons of the 2 different systems. Question number 2, HDX Pro versus a pair of 15s. And question number 3, the HDX Pro versus a pair of general purpose 10 power chest binos. Now, before we dig into that, I wanna cover the image stabilizing science behind the HDX Pro. I originally did a video on the HDX, which are their 2nd gen image stabilizing binos. You can go watch that video right here. What I failed to do in that video was adequately lay out exactly how the image stabilizing works. And when I do this, you're gonna see why some of the failings that exist with the Zulu6 line exist. Here's how image stabilizing works. This could be in your camera, this could be in these binoculars, doesn't matter. Basically, they have a large field of view that the binoculars are capable of accepting information from. Then they have an electronically stabilized gyro in the binos that controls a smaller field of view. When you move the binoculars around, the gyro compensates by moving that smaller field of view around inside the bigger field of view in direct opposition to the way you're moving the binoculars. And so that's how they're able to capture the data from a wide field of view, but then keep an image of a compressed version of that field of view, like a smaller version within the bigger frame, moving around, seemingly taking out all the movement. So up first, let's look at the HDX versus the HDX Pro. Now, I am going to cover the main differences between these 2 binos. Again, if you want to see the full-blown video on these, I recommend going and watching that right here. Now, the first main difference, which applies to a lot of Sig products, is their updated warranty. When I first covered the HDX, there was only a limited warranty on the electronic components in the binoculars, and then I believe a 10-year unlimited warranty. They have now switched all of their products to what they call their infinite guarantee. So there is a lifetime warranty on all Sig products, regardless of, cause of damage. So it's much like a Vortex or a Leupold. Drive over them with a truck, mail them in, no problem. Covers the electronic components, covers the optical components, all of it. And they've made this retroactive. So if you've bought the 2nd gen HDX, you now have a lifetime warranty. Huge shout out to Sig for that. Awesome step. I think with something especially like electro-optics, where you're trying to build trust, it's a relatively new market. These things haven't been in the field being tested for 10 to 15 years. Nobody knows really how long they're going to stand up. I think this is the kind of step you need to take in order to build confidence with your market. Change number 2. One of the big complaints about the HDX was the low light performance. They've done a few things to address this. The first of which is one new coating on the lenses themselves. Now, this is a coating that addresses certain wavelengths. So basically what it does is it increases low light performance pretty dramatically, let's say 10 or 12% just with this one coating. And it decreases peak lighting performance marginally, let's say like 1 to 2%. So you might actually get a slightly less brighter image at midday, which is fine because that wasn't an issue for these binoculars anyways, but you get an improved image at dawn and dusk. Now on that note, this is going to come up a lot here, the low light performance of the HDX Pro. If I was to quantify the difference between the HDX Pro and the regular HDX, I would say the HDX Pro are approximately 15% better in low light conditions. I think they add about 10 to 20 minutes of functional glassing, maybe even as much as half an hour in some situations, to your glassing times. I was recently on a late season mule deer hunt here in British Columbia, and I was glassing from before dawn to after dusk, and these were significantly brighter than my ATX 85. And there was about a good 25 minutes of each morning where the ATX was kind of useless. Like it was just dark and blurry and I wasn't getting any good details. And I was picking up deer with these and able to see pretty good detail. So a significantly improved low light performance with the HDX Pro. The HDX Pro also has a larger prism, which means more light gathering capability. And actually, that's not a right way to say that. A larger prism will give you better light transmission properties because all of the light has to go through the prism. The smaller the prism, the bigger the bottleneck, the lower the light transmission capable. So by increasing the size of the prism, they have allowed more light to travel through. There was also some glare issues on the second gen HDX around the edge of the frame. So what they've done is they have darkened the edges of the prism in order to reduce that glare. Next up, there was scan and target mode on the HDX. So you basically could choose the amplification of the image stabilization. They have moved to OmniScan technology in the HDX Pro. So you no longer decide if you're in scan or target mode. What there is an internal accelerometer. And based on how fast you're moving the glass, you're quickly scanning an area, it's going to be in scan mode. As soon as you slow down and the internal accelerometer measures that reduction in acceleration, it kicks up into target mode. I want to talk about this for a minute because some people have commented that the image stabilizing is not as good on the Pro as it is on the HDX. In some ways they're right and in some ways they're wrong. From a technical perspective, at peak stabilization, they are right that the HDX Pro have a 3% reduction in image stabilizing compared to the HDX. However, I don't even really think 3% is noticeable to the human eye. I think what's influencing the perspective of these people is that they're not used to the OmniScan technology yet. I've used these for a few weeks out in the field, and for the first 2 or 3 days, they felt wonky to me. It took a while. I was getting a little bit of vertigo, and what would happen is I felt like the binoculars were leading me. Like I would be scanning, and I felt like the binoculars kept wanting to move in that direction, so it would almost increase my movement. But what that was the binoculars were staying in scan mode, and you kind of just got to fight that urge to continue to keep up with the binoculars, and then it drops down into target mode, and then you have much more stabilization and you stay in an area. And I think it takes 2 or 3 days glassing with these, and it's not something you have to think about a lot. After 2 or 3 days, you just realize that you're comfortable now. Your eyes have adjusted to the OmniScan technology, and psychologically, you become aware of how you need to move those binoculars to get the level of image stabilizing that you want. I can say, without a doubt, the OmniScan technology is superior to the old scan and target mode. There is a larger gimbal in the HDX Pro. That's for a couple of reasons, but what it results in is needing more battery power. So you'll notice there are 2 battery slots on the HDX Pro, and there was only 1 battery slot on the HDX. Now, at regular use, the Pro gets 40 hours and the HDX gets about 30 hours. So you get about a 25% longer battery life, and you still just got to carry 2 batteries in the device. With the HDX Pro, you get about a 0.1 degree reduction in field of view. If anybody's ever curious about field of view, if you take the angular field of view and multiply it by 52.5, that will give you your field of view in feet at 1,000 yards. So if we do that, the older HDX have a field of view of 199.5 feet at 1,000 yards, and the newer HDX Pro have a 5-foot reduction or 0.1 degree down to 194.5 feet at 1,000 yards. This was really only my major disappointment with the release of the HDX Pro. I was really hoping that they were going to address the reduced field of view. I had a long talk with one of the engineers at Sig, so I'm pretty familiar with some of the engineering struggles that they're facing. Some I can talk about, some I can't. I can assure you it is very high on their priority list to get a larger field of view in these binoculars, but I don't see it happening in the near future. So if you're curious about the HDX Pro, but you're like, I'm going to hold off and see if they come out with a version with a bigger field of view, that ain't happening. I would say in the next 2 years at least. Maybe longer, definitely not sooner. So again, little disappointing to see that we didn't get an increased field of view. However, 0.1 degree or 5 feet from a functional perspective is really not that much of a reduction. So I would say realistically, they feel like they have the same field of view. The last difference between these two that we want to take a look at is weight. The HDX Pro come in at 33.91 ounces, and the HDX second gen come in at 21.9 ounces. So there's 11 ounces, or essentially 3/4 of a pound difference. The HDX Pro are 3/4 of a pound heavier. Now I'm gonna come back to a general conclusion at the end of the video, but that highlights the changes in the HDX Pro over the HDX. Now, before I get into the 15 power comparison, I want to share some quick information about some bear hunts I have available right now. So I am running a special until the end of December. You can receive up to 20% off guided any weapon spring black bear hunts in British Columbia. These hunts run for 7 weeks in the spring. Depending on what week you book, how many people you book for, you can save up to 20%. There's a really strong population of bears in this area. You're right in the coastal range mountains of British Columbia. Super fun hunt, really high opportunity, really good trophy class. It is not unusual to be able to find a 7-footer in this area. If you want any more information about this hunt, please contact me, jay@mindfulhunter.com. I can send you some pics, give you all the details. And again, if you commit and book by the end of December, I can reduce that price by as much as 20%, and this is guaranteed my lowest prices of the year. Now let's move to the comparison to 15s. I recently did a 3-way bino comparison of 15 power binos, where I looked at the Maven B5s, the Sig Zulu 10s, and the Swaro SLCs. You can go watch that video right here. Now what I did is went and updated that spreadsheet with all the data from the HDX Pros, because I think one of the problems in this category, this is a new category for Sig. It's a new category for everybody. And what people do when companies introduce a new category is they try and inappropriately pigeonhole that new product into an older category. And that, in my opinion, is what has been going on with the Sig Zulu6 HDXs, especially the Pros. They've been comparing them to things inappropriately. Really, I think what they should be being compared to is a set of 15s, because like size, optic capabilities, glass quality, all that stuff is way more apples to apples with a 15 than it is with a pair of 10s. So I updated that whole spreadsheet with all the information from an HDX Pro, rescored everything. So we can have a quick look at that spreadsheet here. So I still went through all the same categories: price, resale, weight, length, origin, warranty, weather resistance, ergonomics, field of view, eye relief, eye box, exit pupil, focusing ability, prism, glass quality, glass coatings, image crispness, low light performance, edge-to-edge clarity, chromatic aberration, 4 classes: descriptive, construction, optics, and viewing performance, and 23 categories in total. I go through and note the price of each. I updated the graphs, I updated the weights, I updated the totals for each of the classes. I am not going to go through this entire spreadsheet today. It would simply take too much time. I have outlined several categories that I think are pertinent to this review That's price, weight, ergonomics, field of view, exit pupil, prism, glass quality, glass coatings, and performance. We are going to walk through that, but I am uploading this spreadsheet to my members only site, mindful-reviews.com. If you want access to this site, you want to download it, keep it, look at it, update it, do anything you want to it, all you have to do is go over and be a member. If you're not already, join up, mindful-reviews.com. Let's actually get to the highlights. So first off, let's start at price. So the original HDX are $10.99, Maven B5s are $15.50, the HDX Pro $15.99, the Sig Zulu 10s $16.99, and the Swaros came in at $26.49. So they are very appropriately priced to compete within the 15 power category. And in fact, if we're looking at the second gen HDX, this is a 16 power version. They are very aggressively priced. They're almost 30% less than their counterpart 15s. Now let's take a look at weight. We already talked about the weight of the HDX and the HDX Pro. So again, HDX 21.9, the Pro's 33.91, Swaros at 42.3, Sigs at 42.7, and the Mavens at 45. So to put things in perspective, a 16 power pair of Zulu6 HDX Pros are about 9 ounces less than an equivalent 15 power Zulu 10, and the second gens are about 20 ounces less. Now, ergonomics is something that bears discussion. There's not a whole lot of hand holding that goes on with a pair of 15s. Typically, a lot of tripod glassing, not a lot of hand holding. However, with the standard kind of double barrel design, especially with the Swaro SLCs that have the nice thumb depressions in the back, they're very comfortable to hold. But even these Zulu 10s, like ergonomics is great, focus knob is in the right location, everything about the hand feel is really great. One of the things about the HDX is that it was a little bit weird to hold on to with two hands because it was so small. And this focus wheel is quite far forward. So all the time I would go to, move the focus wheel with my index finger and either have to move my index finger up or use this finger here. And to be honest, I did more one-hand glassing, which with the HDXs, than I did two-hand glassing. Now, it took me a while to get used to it. And I had a chat with Anthony, who's the product line manager for the Sig Zulu6 line. And he actually discussed getting a clay brick and shaving it down like they do when they're designing cars to really figure out, like, listen, we got to add these 2 extra batteries. That's a no-brainer. We don't have a choice about that. But is there a way that we could add them in a spot that would actually make these binoculars nicer to hold on to? And so I got to say, I think he did a fantastic job. Where those fall into the webbing on your thumbs, you feel like you're holding on. It feels more like you're holding on to a traditional pair of 15s. Now, again, where this focused wheel is still a little bit counterintuitive. I keep going to here and then I either slide my hand up or use this third finger instead. Listen, because of the engineering, I'm sure this is where this has got to be. Is it the most intuitive? No. Is it mildly annoying? Yes. Is it a deal breaker? Absolutely not. So I would say overall, the ergonomics are right in line with the traditional pair of 15s. And I think in some ways, although there's an increased weight, the ergonomics of the HDX Pro are actually better than the HDX. Now, field of view, as already mentioned, is what everybody complains about with the Zulu6, but I think that's because they're comparing it, and I've done this myself, with a pair of 10s. So let's walk through where these stack up in comparison to 15s, because after all, 16 power magnification, we should be comparing apples to apples. So the Mavens came in at 236 feet, Swaros at 234, Zulu 10s at 234, HDX at 199.5, and the HDX Pro at 194.5. So to put that in context, That's about a 20% reduction in field of view. So your field of view with an HDX or the Pro is 4/5 of what it would be with a 15 power binocular. When you think about it like that, that's a pill I can swallow. I'm getting the detail and the clarity and the magnification of a pair of 15s with image stabilization, and all I've got to sacrifice is 1/5 or 20% of my viewing area. So when I compare it to a pair of Zulu 10s, for example, instead of a traditional pair of 10 power binoculars, I think it is a much more reasonable compromise. Moving to exit pupil. Swaro is 3.7 millimeters, Sig is 3.7 millimeters, Maven is 3.7 millimeters. Now the HDX Pro has an exit pupil of 3.1, and the HDX has an exit pupil of 2.6. So that is essentially 50 divided by 16 and 42 divided by 16. So that is another reason for the increased low light performance of the HDX Pro. And again, 3.1 millimeters is significantly closer to the 15 power exit pupil of 3.7 than it is to the exit pupil of a pair of 10 power binoculars at 4.2 millimeters. Also, the 3.1 millimeters of the HDX Pro is much closer than the 2.6 millimeters of the HDX. Now, prism is where these binoculars take a bit of a beating. That is a very intentional compromise that the engineers have made both for weight reduction, cost reduction, and size. So the standard prism in a 15 power pair of binoculars is Abbe Koenig. So the Sigs, the Mavens, and the Swaros all have Abbe Koenig prisms. The HDX line have Schmidt-Peshan. Lots of 10 power binoculars have Schmidt-Peshan. The reason you tend to see these more in 15s is that the Abbe Koenig prism is significantly longer. So it's hard to fit that prism in a pair of 10s and keep them compact enough to be in your chest binos. Now, Abbe Koenig prisms let through more light. They only reflect light 3 times, where a Schmidt-Peshan reflects it 5 times. And every time you bounce that light, you're going to have a marginal reduction in light transmission. So that's another one of the reasons why the HDX have been known for low light performance is the high magnification with the Schmidt-Peshan prism. Now let's talk about glass quality and glass coatings. The HDX Pro uses the HDX glass, which is a combination of extra low dispersion glass and high transmission glass. I meant to discuss with the engineer and we were on the phone forever and we just ran out of time, but I'm not sure exactly which elements and which groupings are made of which glass, but there are similarities in that both the Zulu 10 and the Zulu6 use HDX glass, but the groupings are not the same. So it's not like apples to apples saying that the HDX glass of the Zulu 10s is the same as the HDX glass in the Zulu 6s. That's why these are able to be much lighter, they're able to be much shorter, there's compromises being made. So that's all a very complicated way of saying one place where the Zulu 6 line is slightly inferior to, let's say, the Zulu 10 line, the glass quality is not quite as high. Similarly, the glass coatings. However, with the new addition of the low light performing coating that they've placed on the HDX Pros, they're getting much closer to the coatings on like the standard 15s that you would see. Now, as far as viewing performance goes, which remember, I come up with by scoring image crispness, low light performance, edge-to-edge clarity, and chromatic aberration. If you were to put all of these on a tripod, the Sig Zulu 10s, the Mavens, and the Swaros would outperform the HDX line. They do have slightly better glass, better prism, slightly better low light performance. Overall, the viewing performance is slightly better than the HDX line. Another area that the engineers are still working on is edge-to-edge clarity. Again, maybe because it's the gyroscope, maybe because it's the Schmidt-Peshan prism, I don't know. but the edge-to-edge clarity in the HDXs are not as good as the Zulu 10s, for example. However, I would say the viewing performance of the HDX Pros are significantly closer to like a high value pair of 15s than it was with the HDX Gen 2. They have closed that gap significantly. And again, as soon as you go to handhold these suckers, the Pros blow these 15s out of the water, because I don't care how good the glass is. Take the Swaro SLCs, for example. When that image is shaking around like this, because you got a pair of 15s in your hand, the 16 Zulu6 HDX Pros blow it out of the water for your actual ability to pick up animals and see details. So there's the highlights of the comparison between the Pros and the 15 review that I just did a couple weeks ago. Again, if you want all the data in that spreadsheet, head on over mindful-reviews.com. I will get into my conclusions and recommendations in regards to which ones to buy in a moment. But first, we are going to look at the HDX Pros versus a pair of general 10 power chest rig binos. So first off, I would like to say the HDX Gen 2 are a better replacement for 10 power binoculars. The 11 ounce weight difference is significant, and the size. You will need a large bino harness for these. So I had to use a large marsupial when I took my 15s out the other week. And then when I went on that late season mule deer hunt, that was the only bino harness I had that would fit these, and the lid would still close. So if you are looking for a light, compact pair of binoculars that's going to go in a small harness on your chest and not take up much room, the HDX Pros are not a good choice. They're not particularly wide and they're not particularly deep, but they are very long. Like they're only, a quarter, half an inch shorter than these Zulu 10 15 power binoculars. On average, the Pros are going to be about 5 to 6 ounces heavier than your average pair of 10 power binoculars. And if we were going to compare field of view to an average pair of 10 power binoculars, let's take the Swaro EL. They come in at 336 feet at 1,000 yards. Again, the HDX Pro are 194.5. So that's about 140 foot reduction, or about a 40% reduction in field of view. So you can see right off the bat, I think there's more compromises when you want to replace your 10s with one of these than there is if you're looking to replace a pair of 15s. All right, before I get into my final thoughts and recommendations, I want to give one more shout out to Mindful Reviews. I am 100% completely unsponsored. I have no financial incentives from any outdoor companies, and that allows me to be very critical and very honest. So if you enjoy thoughtful, unbiased, non-sponsored gear reviews like this and you want to see more of them, I would appreciate your support. In order to do this, you go to mindful-reviews.com and pick one of the subscription plans. It is an online community platform that I built from scratch. We're nearing 400 members. We have a great set of forums. There's all kinds of people from less experienced to very experienced, willing to give insights and recommendations and share their experience. I'm always in the forums. I'm always available. I do things extra for that community, like I post all my gear lists on there. I will post this spreadsheet on there. So again, if you want to see more reviews like this and you're sick of, influencer paid for garbage reviews that are nothing more than a product highlight reel, head on over mindful-reviews.com. I would greatly appreciate it. All right, final thoughts and recommendations. First thing I want to note is that Sig Sauer does have a tripod attachment on the way for this. They haven't announced it yet, but it should be available sometime in February. Now, in the same order we did our analysis, we're going to do our conclusions and wrap up. So, HDX versus HDX Pro. This is not an either or yes/no question. I think it is a yes and. I think they are different tools for different jobs. I'm gonna take my Alberta mule deer hunt where I guide mule deer, all right? You are glassing from your truck in the dark, in the morning, but then you're doing all these final approach stalks throughout the day. I would not take the HDX Pros because at first light, I can have as many tripods as I want. I'm right beside my truck. I've got lots of equipment. I'm gonna have a nice pair of like Zulu 10s on a tripod for the first 2 hours of the day. Better low light performance, better optical clarity. Then, when I go to stalk in on a mule deer later on in the day, I'm gonna have these in my hand. They're smaller, it's the middle of the day, so low light performance doesn't matter. I'm gonna be tending to glass things, 600-700 yards and in, so the slightly reduced glass quality doesn't matter. It's an archery hunt. I can use these with one hand. These are more difficult to use with one hand. So in that particular case, I think the Gen 2s are superior. I think another case where the Gen 2s are superior is archery elk hunting. Nobody's really glassing at dawn for elk, and if you are, they're big bastards with giant yellow bums, and you're gonna see them from a mile away. The HDX Gen 2s are gonna be completely fine to pick up elk, and when you're running gunning throughout the rest of the day, you've got them in one hand, you're not concerned about low light performance. I think they're the superior tool. However, this means you need to own multiple pairs of binos because these are not gonna be great glassing at daybreak on a traditional mule deer hunt or a sheep hunt or any other hunt where low light performance is key. So if you do not have the money and you want a pair of these and you can only afford one, I would go with the HDX Pro because for what you're gonna lose, you can muscle these with one hand if you have to. Yeah, they're a little bit bigger, but you are getting that significantly improved low light performance, and you're getting a binocular that does a much better job at replacing your 10s and 15s as opposed to just your 10s. Next, moving on to your HDX Pros or your 15s. Again, if I could have both, I would take a pair of 15s and a pair of Gen 2s because then I can use them in different situations. But if I can only have one, I'm going with the HDX Pros because I think it does almost everything that a 15 does, plus it does so much more. You are not carrying a pair of 15s on your chest and using them for your final 200-yard approach on a mule deer. Physically, not happening. They're gonna be shaking all over the place. They're useless for that. Now, let's look at the replacement for a pair of 10s with the HDX Pro. I originally said that the Zulu6 line was not a full-blown replacement for a pair of 10s. If you look at my last video, my primary recommendation was still to save up for a pair of NL Pures because I think they did a better job at being an all-purpose bino. They were good at early morning glassing on a tripod at distance, and they were good to have in your chest because of their increased field of view. The percepted handshake was reduced enough that they were still usable. Well, that video came out 6 months ago, and since then I have used these extensively and these quite a bit. I have changed my mind. If I actually think about, let's think about my next year's schedule. I have a goat hunt in August. I've got an archery elk hunt in September. I got some mule deer hunting at the end of October. And I recognize, like, if I could only take one binocular on all of those hunts, if I actually think about which one I want to take with me, I'm taking these. I am taking the HDX Pro. Yes, there are compromises. Yes, they're not perfect. But if I look at just a one-tool product in order to accomplish everything that I need, the HDX Pro does it better with less compromise than any of the other options. Now, if you enter into a multiple optic conversation, like you got two guys going on a goat hunt, you can bring, let's say, 4 optics in total 2 binos and 2 spotters, or 3 optics, 2 binos and 1 spotter, yes, I'm probably gonna take a pair of high quality 15s, or I might take a pair of non-image stabilizing 8s, or there's other tools that I'm gonna mix into my arsenal, but I would still want a pair of image stabilized with me. So if you're telling me you can only have 1 binocular, I'm going with image stabilized. I was in Alberta, okay? I ran my Swaro NL Pure 12 powers right beside these Gen 2s. My client and now good friend Matt had these. I would swap out with him every now and then. I'm telling you, even with the reduced low light performance and even with the reduced clarity, you find animals quicker, especially when they're handheld with these. It's just a fact. Now, which ones would I buy? Because these are both 16 power. And I think people are falling victim to this like more horsepower psychology. They're like, well, they're already going to be image stabilizing. They all have the same field of view. And that is true in case you didn't know that. So these come in 12, 16, and 20 power. And the HDX Pro come in 14, 16, and 18 power. They all have the same field of view, which I think is a function of the image stabilization. They can't get into the details of that with me. It's probably proprietary information, but you would think the lower power would have a greater field of view. Not the case. However, the lower power does have a larger exit pupil. So the exit pupil of a 16 millimeter is by default smaller than the exit pupil of the 14 power. So if it was me, I would buy the HDX Pro in 14 power. That is plenty of horsepower to glass as far as you want, and you're getting a fairly increased exit pupil, which is going to create better low light performance. And I'd go with the 12s in the HDX Gen 2s. Again, slightly less magnification, but greater exit pupil. Magnification is not the problem with these. Low light performance is. So take the hit in magnification and get the win in exit pupil size. Now, what I would like to say, and what I expressed to Sig, very passionately, is what I want from you guys is a pair of 8 or 10s with, and I don't really care what size the objective is, but I want a large field of view. Because again, I think the consumer psychology is, if they're image stabilizing, I want high magnification. I actually go the opposite way, because I normally carry at least 2 optics with me at all times anyways, whether that be a spotting scope and a pair of binos or 2 pair of binos. So I have no problem putting 15s on a tripod for when I want to look at stuff far away. I want the image stabilizing for when things are like 200, 300, 400 yards and closer, when I'm on my final approach archery stock, those types of situations. I would much rather see a pair of 8s or 10s with image stabilizing added with like a 50% improvement in field of view. Again, this is something they said they were actively working on. I don't think we're going to see a product like that for the next couple of years. Okay, so to wrap all that up, yes, right now, if you're telling me I own nothing, I can only buy 1 pair of binoculars, I would tell you, if you do a lot of big country hunting, get a pair of 14 power HDX Pros. If you already have some other glass and you're more worried about just replacing your chest bino and you still got some stuff for looking at big country from far away, I would personally get a pair of 12 power Gen 2s. If you got the cash, get both, because I'm telling you right now, I have hunts, like on my goat hunt, this is what I want to take. On my archery elk hunt, this is what I want to take. So if you got the cash, buy both. The other thing Sig said is they have no plans whatsoever to discontinue these binoculars, and there's even coming down the line in the next year or two, some improvements planned for these. So stay tuned for that. I was very encouraged to see that they weren't going to discontinue these, because I really honestly believe these are different tools for different jobs. Now, a quick list of the limitations, because I don't want to tell you to buy something and then you come bitch at me later on. So remember, reduced low light performance. Eye box can be somewhat finicky in these. You will get some binocular shadow, like scope shadow, when you're looking through a rifle scope. They do not have the same user experience as a traditional pair of binos. I don't know if that's because of the prism shading, because of the gyroscope. It could be of a multiple factors, but they take a little bit to get used to, and you do need to hold them at that like perfect spot. I kind of need to bring the eye cups to full extension, and then what I do is I just rest these eye cups on the top of my eye here, and then typically I'm wearing a hat. I pinch my hat with my 2 fingers, and if I look through them like this, it's almost perfect for me. But if I bring them in like this, they get weird. Out here, they get weird. But right here is the best. And still, as I move them around, I'll get a little bit of scope shadow. So the eye box is a little bit finicky, and again, reduced field of view. But really, low light performance, eye box, and reduced field of view is the only limitations when you start to compare these with other, even alpha glass. And at the end of the day, the benefits of image stabilization, in my opinion, after running both of these for multiple months on multiple hunts, far outweigh the deficits. All right, folks, that is a wrap for my field tested review of the HDX Pro. I hope that clarified some things, shone some light on some things that might have been confusing. You disagree with me, if you agree with me, if you have your own experiences you want to share, if you have more questions that I failed to address during this review, drop the notes in the comment section below. I'd love to continue the conversation there further. If you could engage with this content, hit the like and subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. YouTube does not do a great job of boosting hunting content in the algorithm, so I need your help to get more eyeballs on this content. And as always, thank you for tuning in.